Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning. I'm just going to very briefly introduce our speaker this morning, Myo Leahy. Myo Leahy. 2 words. Names. Who is going to give us a Dharma talk. Myo is a priest in the San Francisco Zen Center. And he wants to talk. He wants to introduce himself. So he's going to say, here he is, and we're very glad to have him.
Thank you. Actually, I don't particularly want to introduce myself, but since that's part of the process here, I guess I will. Although, what do you need to know? I started sitting in high school by chance or karma, depending on how you look at it, and was ordained by Reb Anderson in '86, and I and my ordination group are just celebrating our 10th anniversary, which is kind of neat. And let's see. Last time I spoke here, I actually don't remember when that was, but I think I was still living with my husband in the East Bay, if I remember correctly. And 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago now, he excused himself from our relationship, and so I found myself somewhat involuntarily in the monkish vein again, and so after fussing around with some different money-making pursuits out in the world, I decided to come back and work for Zen Center, and they asked me to be their treasurer, and also to live over at Hartford Street Zen Center, which some of you know, over in the Castro, to be a kind of a prop to the elderly abbot, Philip Whalen, who was in need of some help. So I've been over there since 10 months now. And probably due to move back here pretty soon, since for various reasons. I guess those are all the particulars that I can think of right now. The seating arrangement's kind of a little funny here. There's this audience over there, right? And then there's these other guys here. But I was somewhat heretically during the sitting trying to figure out how can I rearrange the sitting so it would be cozier, but I couldn't think of anything, so I guess we're stuck with it. Anyway, some of you may feel like it's quite cozy enough. Thank you. But the subject of coziness comes up a little bit because usually if I have the luxury of some time between when someone asks me to talk and actually giving the talk, then it's kind of neat because I can just sit there and let something kind of take shape. And my inspiration is usually, well, what's been on my mind lately? What am I dealing with in my own practice or life? And that tends to be a very convenient way to lead into giving a talk. And I have been thinking a great deal about Sangha lately. And for those of you who don't know, that's a Sanskrit word from a root verb plus a prefix, which sort of means just massing something together. So by itself it doesn't mean so much. It just means a collection or a group or something along those lines. And of course it has very important meaning in the context of Buddhist practice. There are, of course, 3 jewels or treasures Sorry to those of you who are too familiar with this, but some of you may not be familiar with it at all. There's the Buddha, and there's the teaching, and then there's us, the community. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And people have pointed out in the context of Western Dharma practice that, it looks like Sangha is, for some reason, really hard for us, for Americans in particular. Other people have said this. And I was trying to lay my hands on where had I seen that discussed. I think it was in Tricycle or something, one of those Buddhist rags, some while ago. And where people have lots of space to discourse on things like, well, what's the difference between Asian practice and American practice, and how people who grew up practicing Buddhism feel about Sangha. What's that like for them? What's that like for us? What is Sangha like in the context of a culture that puts such a relentless emphasis on individuality? How does that prepare us to practice together? All this really individual thing that we have going in this culture. And I think there are some ways in which it doesn't prepare us very well. And for this reason, for a great many of us, Sangha is a real sticking point. And it's something that, of all of the three treasures, perhaps we are most likely to succumb to the temptation to pay lip service to. And kind of let it say, well, Buddha and Dharma are okay, but Sangha, let's let that one lie for a while. And those of you who, I'm just curious, have some of you had the experience of living in community, particularly say a Buddhist practice context? I'm just wondering how many of you have endured that. Aha! There are some refugees here. Oh, yes. Okay. There's a few of you. So you know what that feels like. And I don't know, that may have been here, it may have been in Asia, and that would make a difference. If you're a Westerner practicing in an Asian context, that would be, I would think, a rather different experience than practicing in one of our homegrown communities here. But you will have had some feeling for what it's like living in a fishbowl, and living, as it were, in one of those gadgets that polishes rocks by banging them together over and over again. And it can be quite painful, as I'm sure many of you know. And people like, I'm just remembering Pema Chodron, who has spoken quite eloquently on this topic. What it's like to be flayed alive by your brothers and sisters. And it's especially true for someone like her, who is the director of a religious community. It's also true for any of you who are who've had some type of ordination, and have probably noticed how much of a magnet for criticism you have become, and how very painful that is. So these are all aspects of practice in a Sangha that I think give us a great deal of trouble. And because that kind of practice is problematic and painful and troublesome, it tends to overshadow the fact that it's also extremely beneficial, extremely it brings us along in some way. It brings us out of ourselves and helps us towards a certain kind of maturity vis-a-vis one another. I feel a little bit constrained by how huge a topic this is. I mean, any of the three treasures could occupy us for a millennium or two, and I think this one in particular could keep us busy for a long, long time. And I also don't want to just sit up here and talk to you guys, because I don't think necessarily that produces such a feeling of Sangha, really. To have one person up here kind of tossing out ideas. I'd rather hear from some of you and talk with some of you and have you talk with each other as a kind of experience of Sangha. In addition to what we've already had this morning, which was sitting together. And, that was lovely. Really, really sweet, peaceful experience of no distinction, no essential troubling differences among us, just one kind of life. Very, very beautiful feeling. But I don't yet know that anyone, I don't really know of anyone who just kind of sits all the time, They don't eventually have to get up and talk to somebody or move the furniture or make something to eat or something. Well, there are people like that, but they're like in hospitals or something. So most of us, you got to, no matter what kind of place you are in your life or your circumstances oblige you to be in some kind of contact with the world and other people. So you got to get up and move around, and as soon as you move, the 3 jewels appear, right? Everything is completely still. You don't have anything. You don't have Buddha, Dharma, or Sangha. But as soon as you pick up the proverbial dust speck, you got everything. You have a whole universe to deal with. And in that context, you have Sangha, definitely, right, in your face. So I wonder, though, most of you here, I wouldn't be surprised. We're all kind of middle class, and I would imagine that a lot of you live by yourselves, kind of, and find that to your liking. I certainly found it to my liking, to a degree, when I lived by myself. And generally speaking, the rule in this country is for the vast majority of Buddhists, we don't live in communities where we expose ourselves to the kind of abrasion that happens in community, and also to the kind of commitment that happens in community. This sort of peeling back of our skin is kind of not only gratuitous, maybe harmful if the other piece of it isn't there, which is these people, you need to be committed to your brothers and sisters. Because if you're not, then you're just torturing each other. If you're there only long enough to carve somebody open, and then you go leave them with a mess, that's not going to work. And that's certainly not what Sangha is about. I don't want to give the impression that I'm talking about like deliberate, like it was one of your Sangha buddies, and you think like, well, he's kind of a creep. Maybe I'm gonna go fix him. Right? So you develop some plan where you're going to kind of go and do surgery on this fellow and improve things that way. That's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm only talking about what comes up quite naturally in the context of rubbing elbows with people, whether it's in the little kitchen at the Page Street Center across the street, or standing in line for the bathroom here, or whatever it is. Your encounters, the way we ricochet off people all day long, all the time, produce all kinds of opportunities for genuine meeting. And in the context of genuine meeting, these Dharma doors open. Well, I almost think like that's enough. I'd like to hear from some of you folks. But I brought my little book and I put all these silly notes in it, so let me see here. There was one other big kind of chunk I want to talk about. And, A couple of items. One is Sangha somehow different for us as gay men? Well, I think it probably is, actually. I think it's different for anyone who has experienced one degree or another of marginalization in a cultural context, and I think a lot of us have. It may be in some ways more intensely true for any of the dozens of other minorities in this country who get pushed into various corners. But I think probably anyone who has grown up gay in this country knows what marginalization feels like. That, I think, puts a special valence on Sangha for us as gay men and makes it perhaps even more crucial that we develop that somehow. We develop intentional community among ourselves. That's not to say that the context of Buddhist practice is the only way to do that, because a lot of you have had some experience of that already around the AIDS epidemic or all kinds of other possibilities are there. Maybe not quite so immediately, but in the relatively recent past, people got together on various political bases and various social concerns in mind, and all of that counts. For those of us who are Buddhist practitioners, there's a special sweetness and intensity to coming together as Buddhists, and with all that entails. So this morning I feel particularly like this is as you know, right, Buddhism is medicine, and medicine you want to be careful with, because used in the wrong way, it's toxic, and that includes Buddhism. Buddhism needs to be, in some instances, dispensed with. The medicine needs to be discarded. So, when I say Buddhism in general and Dharma practice, Sangha in particular may provide a very useful medicine for our community. See, it's worthwhile to remember that it's just medicine, and in and of itself it shouldn't be made into some kind of icon. But as medicine, as a tonic, it might be very, very helpful. So what does that mean? I don't know. We're all sitting around here on a Sunday morning, and I don't know how many of you or see each other outside of this group. Maybe not so many. I only know very few of you. And how in the context of this rather dispersed urban way of life that we have, even as Dharma practitioners, how does Sangha come out of this? Well, I don't particularly know. To be frank, especially since we're here together because we're interested in Dharma practice, and maybe because we're queer also. And it's interesting that in gatherings of gay men, you see guys getting together. It's not really clear that they would necessarily be hanging out with each other if they weren't gay. It's like they have nothing, you can take a couple of different people and say, oh, they have nothing in common, basically totally different lives, totally different interests. And the reason that they got together is because they're gay, which is perfectly legitimate, but it's rather different it provides a special kind of challenge to our Dharma practice if really, we're not really interested in each other, except, well, we're gay and we're Buddhists. So, in that sense, there's a little bit of kind of entropy pushing us apart. So we need make some deliberate or conscious and very careful effort to find how we can meet and encounter each other as Dharma practitioners and gay men and all the other things that we are. Fathers, lovers, sons, teachers, whatever hat or burden we happen to be carrying at a given time. Look at that, 11:30 already. So, with regard to this business of being gay men, Dharma practitioners in need of Sangha, crucial need of all the three treasures for our medicine, but maybe especially Sangha. There's this other idea in Buddhism that I wanted to introduce to you, although a lot of you have probably come across this already, and that is the notion of, in Sanskrit, what's called the Kalyana Mitra, or the auspicious, wholesome, or spiritual friend. This, I think, is an idea that whose time has come. Especially for a lot of us. Especially for those of us who have, as I mentioned, experienced a kind of second-class citizen situation in our own culture, and those of us maybe who have had some estrangement from our families, from the context in which we grew up. I certainly have experienced that. How do we create for ourselves, acquire for ourselves the kinds of resources that people who are more in the mainstream culture take for granted? Family, friends, support networks, all this stuff that just sort of comes along with being a certain kind of inheritor of the benefits that accrue to belonging to a culture and kind of being up toward the surface or the top. That's a two-edged sword, of course. There's an aspect of burden to that also. But a lot of people, and I think of my contemporaries I grew up with, who have enormous resources in their lives, financial and familial and all of this stuff. And it often requires a lot of deliberate effort for gay men to recontextualize themselves in the wake of coming out and so forth, and encountering that kind of nasty cultural dissonance that that whole process entails. So then in the wake of that, what do you put together? What kind of a life do you come up with for yourself that has those sorts of supports that we all need? Those of you who are Buddhists, I think, have a great resource there to turn to, a source of nourishment and support and encouragement in your life. And this notion of the Kalyana Mitra simply means that one of the ways to associate together as Buddhists is you find someone with whom you feel some affinity or openness or something, and the two of you, or more, become spiritual friends. And what that means is you encourage and respect each other's Dharma practice. That's your main task. You practice respect and encouragement with regard to each other, and with regard to your efforts to practice Buddhism, whatever that is, whatever type or form or whatever it is that you're managing. And now, I think this probably sounds a little artificial, and, well, in a way it is, I guess. But part of the artificiality is one aspect. Another aspect is quite positive, is that it's intentional. It's quite deliberate. It flows from our intention to live in some sane, wholesome way in this world as Buddhists or whatever. And in that regard, I think it is quite helpful potentially to us. And your spiritual friend or your Kalyana Mitra may not necessarily be someone you particularly choose for yourself. He or she may be chosen for you by circumstances. I recently had this experience, and someone that I practice with, whom I realized I had this relationship with, although I hadn't volunteered to, and don't know that I would have chosen from the outset and said, okay, that person will be my Kalyana Mitra. I don't think I would have done that. But anyway, here it is. And so I now get to experience the challenge and the encouragement and the frustration of having that kind of commitment in this particular Buddhist context that I'm talking about. It's pretty neat. It means being available to somebody else, and you could have more than one, but it's a little time-consuming. We need to be kind of somehow available to each other in a way that works for all of us, or both of us. But so if someone like had a life with a job and boyfriends or whatever, and then also had like 6, 8, or 10 spiritual friends, I'd sort of wonder, how are they doing that? How are they doing that? But 1 or 2 or 3, even if you're very energetic, and it's like you don't have to hang out with them all the time, but they may call you up, and say, I just screamed at my boss or something, or my boyfriend just hit me, or whatever it is, and there you are. There's a context for Dharma practice and investigation that you can share with that person. And and it's important that this is a peer relationship. How should I say? That should be like the deliberate, the conscious part. This is a peer relationship. Everybody's noticed probably how there are times when we, vis-a-vis one another, one person kind of is like, okay, now I am sort of teacher. Or they don't even say that. It just happens, because that's the circumstance. The one person knows something or says something, and the other person is like, oh, that's really helpful. Then that person was the teacher then, and this person was a student, and it should also be able to go this way, back and forth, moving around, very fluid. So the basis of that fluidity is just a peer relationship, and my spiritual friend speaks, and I listen respectfully, and then maybe I say something, or maybe I don't. Maybe I'm just there with him or her or whoever it is, and vice versa. So before I talk myself to death here, I just want to throw out this idea of spiritual friendship, and as is the case with pretty much all these Buddhist notions, there's this process that, of course, the Indian thinkers made very specific and clear about how you hear some notion of Dharma, and then that's the first step, and then you kind of turn it within for a while, because when you hear some words, it's like Zazen instruction. You say to somebody, well, follow your breathing or whatever it is. You don't know what that is. I can't tell you what that is. You can't tell me what that is. All I can do is I say those words, you hear them, then you you do something. You let them into your body gradually, and then they, you have some organic, visceral, developed understanding or feeling about what that is. Oh, follow your breathing, or sit up straight, or let your awareness spread completely through your body as you sit, and all that sort of stuff. Eventually you have some feeling for that, and then it becomes yours. And that's kind of like the third phase. These are supposedly 3 kinds of wisdom. There's the hearing, there's the reflection, and there's the cultivation. Shruta, Chinta, and Bhavana. All 3 of those are a facet. So when I tell you, when I say spiritual friend or Kalyana Mitra, it's like, well, who the hell knows what that is? Unless maybe you've studied it before, then you have some idea or feeling. But so what I'm suggesting is, so having heard that, maybe turn it now a bit and see what comes of it, and let it into your body, and then you may suddenly at some point in your life encounter someone, and you will feel, oh, this is like, in retrospect, maybe you realize, oh, I've been a spiritual friend with so-and-so for 3 months. I didn't even know it. Then you'll know that bhavana, the cultivation aspect of this teaching, has happened already for you. So I'm just throwing that out there. Put an ad in the BAR, seeking spiritual friend. They should have a whole new category for that, right? That would be very interesting. I wonder if they'd go for that. Now they probably wouldn't. But anyway, See, I just think it would be really interesting to see how that would affect our Sangha, which, like most American Sanghas, is so dispersed. We leave this place, right, and just go rolling like marbles all over the city, and and it's not like we constantly come back to the same group of people. It's not like especially not like in. It's not even like Asian Buddhist practice, and it's not like Western Christian monastic practice, where at least ostensibly you go and you're with those guys until you die, right? You make your solemn profession in a Catholic monastery. They will bury you, basically, and some of your brothers will die, and then your life will go on for a while, then you will die, and those brothers will bury you. And that is an intense commitment. Very intense. We don't have really anything like that. And at Zen Center here, for example, which is a pretty mature Sangha, as American Sanghas go, we still don't know how to deal with that. We don't quite have it set up. How do we deal with people who really want to spend their lives in that kind of context? Because the model that we acquire from Asia isn't like that. Particularly the Japanese model is like a training model, right? You take someone, you stick them in school, and then when they're done, you throw them out, right? And so we had this thing where, the curriculum is like 20 years long, i.e., but still, eventually you're supposed to get rid of them and make room for new people. Well, what about people who want to live in that kind of Sangha context to the end of their days? We don't really have that figured out yet, and it keeps coming up over and over again. That's one kind of Sangha practice that needs to be available in this country. And also, we need this looser setup, where we can still feel like there's Sangha and also pursue our individual lives, which is that's what we inherit from this culture, this kind of very individualistic, highly tailored way of life that you, insofar as your circumstances permit, you get to choose what you do, doctor, lawyer, whatever it is, furniture maker, whatever it is, you get to pick. Unless your circumstances are very severe. And in that case, your choices are much more limited. Just ask a gay man who realizes, I've been in this law firm for 18 years and they've not made me a partner. I don't know why that is. This happens. So now I get to figure out how can we talk a little bit. I'm sure some of you have some ideas or experiences. The Kalyana Mitra from hell. You want to tell those stories. It'd be kind of interesting. Anybody have something to share this morning? Yeah.
I have a burning question to you. I've really gotten a lot out of this morning, but it's partly because of what's happened recently. Yesterday I had a very intense conversation, although it was really more one way, and I was the listener, because that's how it was set up, with a Buddhist lesbian. And I don't know how many people here are aware, but this is everyone's aware this is a gay Buddhist group, but there is not a comparable lesbian Buddhist group in the Bay Area. There used to be a small group called the Dharma Sisters, and this was a woman who had been involved in that group, which is no longer. And we got into a discussion about, I made a comment to her, and it was probably, I don't know if it was a mistake or not, but I said, there's some of us in GBF that would like to have some events where it's not just gay men, but it would be nice to do some things with our lesbian sisters, Buddhist sisters. And that's when she went off on this, and I was just a listener at that point, and she said, that there's a reason why there isn't a lesbian Buddhist group, and there's a reason why there is a gay Buddhist group, and I think it ties back into Sangha, but I'm not totally sure exactly how. And she said most of the lesbians that are Buddhists are practicing in Dharma centers, and they don't have a need to have their own group and get together in a Buddhist context as lesbians. And we obviously here do have that need, and I'm wondering whether gay men have a greater need. I mean, you said earlier today that Sangha is one of the three jewels, and we all need to be participating in Sangha as part of practice. And these lesbians are participating in, I suppose, in a practice center, and maybe they're creating Sangha there, or maybe they're like a lot of us, we are rolling marbles across the city, in a sense, across our lives, our society. But I wonder whether, because the differences that gay men are different than anyone else in society, that whether we have a greater need right now to have a gay Buddhist Sangha, because there's some need for it. Question mark.
Question mark. Well, thank you for that question. But, I have no idea. But my guess is that there must be a need, and that's why people are here. Probably because why else? Why else would there be such a group if somehow we didn't want it? Why didn't, when Tom Moons asked me to come talk here, why didn't I say, shit. I thought, I'll do that.
Well, we are like what you were saying, just to insert this, most people here I don't believe, spend a lot of time with other people here outside of here.
Mm-hmm. That was my guess.
Maybe there's one or two people here there that do, but by and large, and people can say this is not true, but I think that's the case. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, we're in a Sangha, but the Sangha's not really happening intensely.
The Sangha is very dispersed. Did you want to add something?
Some of you may have attended one or more of the lectures by Professor from Columbia, Robert Thurman at California Institute of Medical Studies, professor of Indo-Tibetan studies there. And one of the points he made impressed me a great deal. It was made a thesis of it, actually, and it's the idea of a fifth peak, so-called fifth peak in Buddhism. And he harkened back to a talk that he had heard from a Japanese Buddhist some 25 years ago, who said that if there was a fifth peak that could four historically together, that it would be in the West. And goes on for a number of reasons as to why that is and why Buddhism is making such an impact and potential impact here in the United States. And he goes on then to talk about the role of monasticism in spiritual life and in change in various times and places, and specifically the lack of a monastic tradition and culture in this country. And taking that to another track, which we tend to do some in a group called the Spirit Men, which is a gay group, it seems to me that gay men in particular have a potential that could be released by monastic culture in the sense that is talked about in Care of the Soul, Thomas More, containment walls that serve that purpose in a monastery, and that in many societies through time, and certainly in Tibetan and Buddhist traditions, that's been a very important feature, not just for those that are inmates, but for the society as a whole. And for gay men, well, my own thinking is that there's great potential there, partly because of the depth that gay men have, which is inaccessible due to some of the pain that's there, and due to the boundary problems that we have generally in society, and specifically to the point that you alluded to, that if gays are here for a purpose, it certainly somehow relates to that. And so coming back to Sangha, which is not synonymous with a monastic feature per se, maybe one of the things gay men need to think about is not one form, but many forms of a monastic tradition that we may be thinking about for a variety of things, from education to transgeneration issues to dying and the like.
In more traditional formulations of Buddhism, of course, the Sangha was largely monastic, by and large. It's like, well, that's the serious Sangha, right? The monks and the nuns. Then you got your laymen and laywomen, but really, you got your monks and nuns. And one of the things I think that has the potential to be very different in the West is along these lines, namely that the idea of monasticism has already undergone a great deal of evolution in the context of American Dharma practice, such that forms will evolve, as they already have, where the monastic experience is accessible to more and more and more people, and therefore its potential effects and rewards can be spread further than has been the case in the past. How that might affect us specifically as gay men is not so clear, but it's hard for me to imagine that there won't be some effect. It's funny, there are Christian monastic communities where it's pretty obvious there's some gay guys there. It's pretty obvious. I don't know, maybe they don't talk about it. But then you get this place like, a quite famous Cistercian monastery in Colorado, which says, we won't take homosexual men, because they have, quote, adjustment problems, unquote. It's like, so this has got to change, right? This has to change. And slowly, very slowly, has already begun to, I think. What sorts of things will we come up with as gay men that may seem like evolutions of monastic styles of practice? I don't know. For a while there was. Does it count to have like those? What was that? The gay men's spiritual retreat that Isan Dorsey did for years. Those are little monastic experiences, and I see no reason why we can't use existing Buddhist tools to come up with all kinds of new stuff. The reliable and powerful equipment, such as is provided by the precepts, for example. There's all kinds of stuff there that we can use to contextualize our own Dharma practice. I don't think I've added much to anything you guys said, and I'm sorry. It's very interesting to speculate why is it different for the lesbians? I really don't know. I mean, I was over there at Hartford Street when the Dharma sisters stopped coming there, and it wasn't really clear, although one woman was very unhappy with us who were over there, feeling like we weren't welcoming enough and so forth. And I examined my own conscience. Couldn't quite figure out how that was, but maybe it was. I didn't even see it. I was quite happy to see them when they showed up, but maybe that wasn't what she meant. Anyway, something didn't work. I don't know what that's about, and there aren't any women here to ask. But one thing I didn't know was if it's true that most of the lesbians who are doing Dharma practice have other sanghas that they do that with, that could have a very big effect. Then what would they need this other space to come together for? If they, as women and as lesbians and Dharma practitioners, have a context where they can feel completely themselves, then maybe they don't need something else. But maybe that's less easily come by for gay men. And if so, that's very much worth looking at.
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of bouncing off what John back there said, that my experience with gay men that I know and for myself is that there's a theme of feeling like an outsider in search for belonging that is part of the gay experience, and I'm sure the lesbian experience too, for my lesbian friends. That kind of wound, I think, brings up an existential crisis that gives us a particular affinity for Buddhism, and then the experience of AIDS and suffering and impermanence. And I think there's a whole struggle going on, I think, in our community now to deepen people not really knowing what that looks like and being suspicious of any spiritual tradition, because as you pointed out, they've been rejecting us. But Buddhism is very exciting because it has so little dogma as compared to many of the spiritual philosophies. And one of the things that comes up in the Thursday night sittings a lot is the whole question of a teacherless Sangha, which is what GBF really is, and the kind of pros and cons of that, because a lot of people come to Thursday night or Sunday not knowing anything about Buddhism, and they may leave not knowing anything because no one tells them, and there's a disadvantage to that because you can't ask the teacher, for today you are the teacher. But there's also something wonderful about that because it doesn't, we are all teachers, as you said, we're all spiritual friends to one another.
Right.
And that's quite beautiful.
Right, I agree, and that's why I think a group like this could work.
Yes.
Because it doesn't have to be a teacher. Mind you, I'm from the Zen school, so we could spend a whole lot more time talking about how the teacher functions. But the teacher, as you say, could pop up anywhere. And it's probably best when the teacher pops up if the person out of whose mouth the teaching is coming doesn't notice it. That's best. Once you start to notice it, it can start to get a little heavy. But if they don't notice, it can be quite beautiful.
I'm sort of taking out of what Mark said in a way. For me personally, Buddhism, and it relates back to what you did say, my own internalized self-rejection, splits from myself, not looking at what I'm going to see related to my own internalized negativity about my sexuality, it's wrong, whatever, all the things that I had as I grew up. Which are still, they're really very much right there for me right now. Because of my Buddhist practice, I'm much more aware, a much better sense of seeing them. But what seems to me unique about Buddhism, as I compare it to the other spiritual traditions that I know, it's mostly just Christianity, and also humanism, is the way, the kind of process of sitting, and self-acceptance and doing metta and so on helps you sort of explore and become more comfortable with it. And it's very important for me to be here with other people who, at least there's one level of discomfort that's sort of shedding the comfort.
Yeah, I agree.
I continue on with that. It's a rather ironic that some of the people that I've met on the outside, and I think Bob also had this experience with this talk, because I talked to him, is that the perception is you must be meeting because people are meeting each other for dates. And if you're not, then why are you meeting? And it's ironic because I think there's a lot of not dating going on. It's ironic to be sort of accused of something, and that's the perception, and it's not the perception. So when I was up at the Zen Center for a couple months when I first lived here, back here, and I knew there was gay men there, and some of them were on our mailing list, but they didn't come to our meetings, and here it's like half a block away. And I just came back from New York talking to some of the GBF people on our mailing list there, and there's a lot of gay men associated with Mount Tremper Monastery, the city center in New York. There's a lot of people there. In fact, Eric Colvig, one of our teachers, among many teachers, just gave a program there in mid-July on sexuality and the Dharma, based on an article he wrote at GBF back in October. They picked it up and said, we want you to do it. So I'm sure they had a lot of gay people there that weekend. And when I talked to the few people there, it was like, the thought of meeting together and making that a central part of your practice, of meeting with gay men, seemed to be like a new idea, which I mean, we've been at this for 5 years, so there must be some validity. So I think there is a certain quality of being together and sitting together and doing the Dharma work together that I don't see it as less or more than what I do at the Zen Center. I go there on Saturday and I sit and hear a Dharma talk and be with people. That's a beautiful experience too. I don't say that's right and this is wrong, or I don't make that balance. I mean, they're both right. And so you can have a practice where you go to a spirit rock and you can be very loyal to that practice, and you can be very loyal and get something LGBT. But I think people do make the distinction. I think the Dharma sister people maybe are making that distinction that, well, we're in regular practice, we don't need that. Whereas there's a quality in meeting with other people that are on the same, closer to the same path in the sense of your life, that is very beautiful, and very sweet, and very valuable.
There's a real deep stuff going on here about, especially with males in general, and the tendency to segregate ourselves as gay men away from being men. And I think if you look at the culture in general, all over the world, there's a tendency for men from the earliest times to form hunting parties, teams, groups, gangs, political parties. The Dominicans are, different groups. There's a need for men to move in groups for a singular purpose, whether it's pursuing a goal, a game, or whatever. And I think gay men, probably because we're not we're evolving now, put themselves down a lot. Because I think the incredible uniqueness of each gay man, as opposed to the trap of commonality that a lot of straight men get, where they serve a family or a particular group, it should be paid more attention to. And the uniqueness of a creative person, and especially following the Dharma, when we're becoming the Buddha, is a thing that should really be looked at. Because as you evolve in the flower as a unique human being, you're going to go and leave the group, period, and no longer need that I don't know what you would call it, that dependency. And I really think people should pay exquisite attention to the benefits of being gay and unique and open, and not use straight people's reference reality to make ourselves feel lonely. Because all my life, as I've been in and out of a lot of straight groups, I'm astounded at how much I project on them that they don't have. Even the religious communities, I would think, wow, is what they have is what I would think I would want, and when I get to know them, they don't have it. And they bind themselves in groups out of fear of loneliness and stay in marriages and family relationships out of that fear of moving uniquely as their own, which a lot of us, which you call marginalized, but I'm beginning to think if we pay more attention to the benefit of it, as individual flowering persons, we can contribute to our collective culture better, and as creators. I understand the sympathy of the group, but I also find the tyranny of the group something to be watched out for. And also the thing about sucking up to a group, there's just something in there, and I think we're evolving into it, and it hasn't been done. And we're at a very unique point in history, as far as the family breaking down, and now predict it's a 50-50 chance straight people will ever stay together and marry, even though they have God and the mothers-in-laws and the fathers-in-laws and the entire Republican Party. And yet, gay people, there's a certain association with gay people. If gay people ain't picking up because of a genital or a sexual longing that they want, that they really aren't looking at the camaraderie, the freedom to come and fully love and hug, and then move away like marbles. without clinging. There's a freedom in that that isn't in the gangs. You know some of these gang people, they can't even get out of those gangs. They're beaten up. But I would just want to do that so that we go in a different direction.
Yeah, I'd really like to commend what you're saying. I think that's exactly what GBF in its best form is. It really is an affinity group. People come together because they like each other, and get along. I've never seen such an easy consensus in any group, and with like the steering committee. We've had historically, bickering too, but that aspect of it, I think, is really very attractive. And I also feel that it's a periodic deep Sangha. It's a deep Sangha that happens, twice a month, and every Thursday for those who participate on those days. It's very deep, and you just kind of take off. You come back right where you left off the time before and deepen it even more. I'm very happy.
I'm particularly appreciative of the comments about the marginalization. I think in part because as I think about it and as I've experienced it, an artifact of that marginalization is further derision and pulling apart. And I think that the first step in countering that is an awareness of the marginalization in that artifact piece. There's a group of us who have been meeting in the East Bay every other week, and this is a group of GBF men. And it's interesting because a lot of the issues that are being discussed around Sangha and that are being reflected in the discussion here are there as well. There are women from the community who are asking, can we come in? And the question goes back to some of the issues that are being echoed here. I guess the point that comes to mind is an awareness of that artifact of the marginalization, and is it more derision, or do you just sort of become more aware of that artifact and make decisions going in the opposite direction of it? It's a struggle.
This is great. I just wanted to comment that we are over time, but if you want to continue for a bit, or
I was just going to comment that to me one of the great things about Buddhism is its willingness to accept and willingness to group. The Buddha never said that you belong to a certain caste or kingdom. Didn't matter. So something I'm struggling with is I love this idea of sitting with this group. I've sat with mixed and straight Buddhist groups and never felt that I could be myself. So I love the idea that I can just be completely open about my sexuality. But somehow I'd like to feel that we could have anyone come here, lesbians, gays, and they could be perfectly welcome to sit in the group.
Yeah.
I would just like to throw that out. It's a way to work that out. But, I don't think it would be healthy to be exclusive.
I think you're right.
I don't know why, but I feel a need to be exclusive. I don't understand it, but that's real important to me, to be able to sit just with other male homosexuals. I don't know why, but it's real important to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some energy that's working in GBF that has to do with the fact that we're all gay men, and that gives us some nourishment that I don't know why it works exactly. I really couldn't analyze it, interpret it. It seems to work really well. And it gives a different atmosphere, and especially in smaller groups, you seem to
One of the questions that comes up in the Eastern group is, does it have to be so polarized? Can't both exist? Just in different places at different times, and still be within keeping of inclusion, and then respecting the need for times when it maybe is less inclusive. And does it have to be so polarized?
Polarized, I don't see it as polarized because we have our own things. Not we're not at polar opposites from anybody else. We just are what we are. That's how I see it.
No, I'm thinking about polarization more around inclusion versus exclusion.
But it isn't. I don't see it as exclusion. I just see it as we're doing gay men coming together.
One possibility is it's quite possible that what occurs here or is occurring here with exclusively, who knows, maybe there's a heterosexual in here somewhere. But, it's possible that, who knows, all kinds of people could be here in a way that would not affect how you feel. That you might still have that feeling that this is quite an exclusive group in some ways, but the way that they're here, these other people, wherever they are, just doesn't intrude. That strikes me as a possibility.
I just want to say this because the way that I feel is for personal learning, it will be very wise that every person asks themselves why really they want to be together only with gay male, and why not also with other kinds of people. It's very easy to say, just because we're gay male, but to really search in ourselves, to really ask ourselves, why do really we want to be together, or why not with other people?
What are the actual feelings involved? Yeah.
Two things occurred to me. One off of what Don said. I worked with the Taoists for some period of time, and the Sufi that I worked with, to a variety of esoteric questions, would always simply say, just do the work. Just do the work. Well, it seems to me that at GBF, I'm doing some of the best work of my life, and that is, in fact, I'm being a gay man with gay men. And I'm not being defensive about it. And I really don't think we have any litmus test at the door that says what you do sexually, what your real spiritual practice might or might not be. And then the second thing that I would like to address is really to your comments, and that is that I think that we are doing a very special work, and the work we are doing here is being here. And I would propose that when we leave here, while we are in fact these rolling marbles, we are rolling marbles with a little bit of spin that we perhaps didn't have before we got here.
I betcha.
And that is going to create things that none of us can perceive or expect or anything else. And we will look back on this time as amazing. And I think it's okay for me not to know where in the world I'm going. I mean, I spent too much of my life, the bulk of my life, unfortunately, spent knowing where I was going and not like being there. And I'm really grateful for as much time as I can now get not to know where I'm going and not to know what I'm going to get. And I have had the enormous good fortune to make some spiritual friends.
Excellent. Enough chatter for now, or a couple more comments? Yeah.
We eventually have to.
They have to go sometime. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
We have, I guess, some announcements, and then we got Stephen Trumpets.
Mark on your calendar, October 6th is going to be our summer picnic. Oh, no. It's a summer picnic. Oh, wait, summer picnic. Also, I'm playing my tape again. In the spirit of Sangha, if you interpret Sangha other than just sitting on a pillow with other people, but also working together in a project, the Hamilton Family Center, we do a dinner once a month. We do it Monday and Saturday. It's a group of people, gay men, working together to perform a specific project, and it's a very rewarding experience. If you're interested, there's going to be a sign-up sheet here, and you get your name and number, and you can contact it. And so I will be out 5 cups in the social.
For those people who are not on the mailing list, there are cards out by the Donna Bowl that you could fill in, and then you'll be put on the mailing list. I know there's a couple new people here, so you might not be on. So we want to note that. It's right next to the Donna Bowl, which is our donation bowl. And on our steering committee, we decided to try to add more explanation around some of these things. We try to make all our activities self-supporting, except the newsletter. The newsletter is really what really costs us the money that that's what we ask for donations from around the country, whoever's on the mailing list. So all our events, such as these Sunday events, are self-supporting, which we're really pleased at. And our workshops are all self-supporting. A lot of times the workshops cost $10 because that's what pays for the rental of the space. So the Donna Bowl is there to support these Sunday meetings, so anything you can get would be very welcome. The other thing we want to mention is several program things coming up. We do have our annual weekend retreat, which is monastic-oriented practice at Vajrapani, which is a Tibetan monastic tradition retreat at Boulder Creek. That's coming up in September. So you all got the notices, and I just was picking up mail. I noticed things are starting to come back in now for people. I think we're going to have a really nice number there. We always have had, and so please. But there is a limit to the space. So if you intend to go, please get your application in as soon as possible. David Sinceri wanted me to mention that we are sincere about saying there are scholarships available. So if people really can't afford it and they would like to go, I think they should contact us. And it's certainly private discussion about that. So that is a possibility. The other thing that's coming up is, and it really fits into the topic today, the Sangha. We've decided to sort of bite the bullet and really address relationships. So we have a one-day workshop coming up in November 9th. It's scheduled, all-day workshop on relationships. And we're going to be looking at a lot of different dimensions of relationships. If you would like to participate in the initial discussion about that workshop, it's going to be on the 18th of this month at where I live. Jeff Miller, who's sort of very interested in that, he's living at that same house. So we're going to meet at, and you can contact me, or it's on 29th Avenue. But we're going to have an initial discussion looking at what questions we want to address in that workshop. So there's a lot of questions about dating relationships within GBF, what that feels like, and I'm not sure all the questions we're going to address, but we're going to plan that. We're going to initially look at that on the 18th, and then plan the workshop on for the 9th of November. I think that's all.
You say the 18th this month?
The 18th of this month. It's on Sunday from 10 to 12 at where I live. It's sort of a planning group. We're going to brainstorm what sort of things we want to do in that workshop. And by the way, this is called a workshop. It's relationship project because we decided to make it an ongoing look at this rather than just doing a workshop and dropping it. So the workshop would be the first step, and we might have an ongoing group emerging from that to look at the dimension of how we work our relationships and the dimensions of those relationships.
Two announcements. One, in a few months we'll be in need of a new editor of the newsletter, as I'm going to be leaving that position. And the steering committee decided that it would be ideal if we could find 2 co-editors to take over the position, the job. So if anybody here might be interested, or if you can think of someone else in the Sangha that might be interested, please see myself or any of the steering committee members. And number 2, some of us may be going out to lunch after the social hour, and so if you'd like to do that, where should we meet?
Well, maybe just talk it up, and we usually kind of figure out.
We meet in the door.
Yeah.
I need to add something to Bob's comment about the editorship. The tradition has been, this is 5 years this newsletter's been going on, and it's in the early years, up to really when Bob took over, it's been a one-man job. Somebody had to do all the work. And over the 2 years that Bob's been working at it, and many other people have been working at it, we've built up an organization. We've built up proofreaders and people that solicit visuals and layout people and so on. So now it's not a one-man operation, and I think it's considerably easier now asking for co-editors when these people will know that they're not here to do all the work yourself. We have a whole system designed around this. We have Mark does the mailing party. It used to be the person that did the newsletter had to do all that, and now we have a system. So it's an easier job, and I think it's a very exciting job.
And it is just editing, not layout, right, which is a big thing. Okay, also, we always need a couple people to hang out and make sure everything gets washed. And thank you, Tom. And anybody else?
I can help.
Oh, wow.
One brief point. In return for helping, I'd like to say, I forgot to add that this is just for your consideration. If you develop a spiritual friendship, you should seriously consider not having sex. Seriously, just think about it, please. Sorry.
Also,
would you like to give me some anecdotes on how that
I'd rather not.
That makes choosing a spiritual friend very careful.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
The other thing to bear in mind is that this is a hospice, and to keep your voices low, you really just build and build and build. So if somebody shushes you, don't take it personally. Okay. I guess the dedication on that.
Oh, please.
By the power and the truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.